Gold participants and listeners from around the world. I'm Kristen Schwartz, licensed midwife and MC for Gold Learning. And here at Gold, we are in the middle of recording a very exciting lecture pack titled Complex Medical Issues in the Lactating Parent. And we would like to check in with our speakers. And so you can get to know them a little bit and hear about the topic and the presentation and what our speakers are up to these days. And with me today, you can see her here, already ready to go, is Alia Macrina Heise. Welcome, Alia.
Hi, Kristen. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here. And I know you've spoken for Gold before, isn't that right?
Yes, I have several years ago when the topic of DMER was even more unknown than it is now. I did one of my earliest presentations on gold.
Wonderful. So you kind of you are a trailblazer in that topic. Really, you brought us that to our attention, and broadened our horizon here. So that's absolutely wonderful. So for our listeners who don't know you yet, who had not the pleasure of listening to your other presentation, tell us a little bit about yourself. You are an IBCLC, and so tell us how about your journey. How did you get excited about the topic?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I had been working in the field of lactation first as a volunteer in a nursing mothers advisory council outside Philadelphia. Abington Nursing Mothers got me interested in peer counseling when my second child was born in 2004. And then when my family and I relocated to Western New York, I started working with WIC as a peer counselor and became certified as a CLC. So I had been casually in the field of lactation for a few years when my third child, my daughter, was born in 2007. And my breastfeeding experience with her was originally uneventful. And it felt normal and familiar until it didn't. It felt very abnormal and unfamiliar. And I started to have an extreme negative emotional reaction, very brief, very intense, multiple times during the day. I kept describing it as postpartum depression that came and went. As we know, that postpartum depression doesn't come and go.
Right.
But I had just had a baby, so to me it was something that was related to my postpartum period. And so I went digging for information on online message boards. And I was in a breastfeeding message board, and I looked day after day after day at a thread that was entitled "Only When Nursing." It was in a postpartum depression breastfeeding board, and it said "Only when nursing." And I didn't open it, and I didn't open it, and I didn't open it. I kept digging and trying to figure out what's going on. And finally, I was like, well, this has been staring me in the face for days now. And I do work in lactation, so if somebody is experiencing a negative emotional experience only when nursing, maybe I should familiarize myself with what's going on. Okay. And I opened it up, and she explained the exact emotional experience that I had been having, like all the way down to the finest detail. So I started paying attention and realized that I hadn't connected it to my letdown because I was having so many letdowns during the day, especially with a high supply. I was having a lot of spontaneous releases. And so I very quickly at that point realized that this was a negative emotional reaction that happened right before letdown, lasted only a couple minutes, and then dissipated and went away, and I felt completely normal and fine until my next milk ejection reflex. So after that, I started digging for answers and trying to find other professionals in the field to dig with me. And 12 and a half years later, here we are.
Well, let me ask you this, Alia. That must have been quite a shock. You worked in lactation. You had already 2 babies prior, right? Your breastfeeding journey, as you mentioned, started out uneventful, and all of a sudden this happened. That must have been that must have been something that really shook you to your core, because you're thinking, you know it all, you have the experience. What's happening? That must have been very unsettling for you.
Yeah, in some ways it was, but I did start finding other mothers who were whispering about it online, and it was sort of thing where it's like, well, I know I'm special, but I'm not that special. I can't be
Mm-hmm.
alone in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as a professional, something that aided me and also really led me to my mentor, Diane Wiesinger, who worked with me so much and
Mm-hmm.
was life changing in the beginning of this work, was the humility that we both brought to it. That even though we were professionals, that ultimately lactation is still a new science and we can't possibly know it all.
Mm-hmm.
And that there are things to learn, and even when we're missing an evidence base, the place that we need to start is listening to the mothers, because the mothers have things to tell us.
Right, right. The mothers have things to tell us. So during your journey there, you mentioned you had a really good mentor there, and you found other professionals who were in that with you. And but did you encounter any barriers? Did you come across any care providers that say, "Oh, this is all nonsense. This is not real. Get over it. What's the big deal?" Did you encounter that as well?
Yeah, a variety of and different versions of that for sure. Um, I, I wasn't taken seriously by most of the medical professionals inside lactation community of professionals. I definitely found people who were at least more willing to talk about it. In the beginning, a lot of people, thought that it was psychological,
Mm-hmm.
and there must be some kind of repressed trauma and something. It's an emotional problem, so therefore it must be psychological, not physiological. So a little bit of disbelief and pushback. But again, when you start seeing something that is a hair trigger reflex, just like hitting your knee, you can't stop it, and
Right.
you start seeing the anecdotal evidence from all the mothers coming forward with all of their various backgrounds and histories. Slowly but surely, we were able to collect enough, at least anecdotal evidence, to show that it's a physiological response to something that's happening in the brain and the body with the milk release.
Interesting, interesting. You mentioned that in the beginning, when you started out doing your research, there wasn't much available, and now you see, there is more awareness about it, right?
Yeah, yes. You can. It just makes me happy. um, yeah, suddenly emotional too. It was very lonely and isolating in the
Mm.
beginning. Trying to understand my own experience and not having really anybody out there to say me too.
Yeah,
And the first thing, when mothers find the information and they find the support group page, the first thing that almost every mother says is, "I thought I was crazy." And I'm so glad that they can now Google "I feel sad when breastfeeding," and they can immediately find answers,
hmm,
um, and find so much relief. And often having the knowledge and the answers is enough to keep them breastfeeding when they
right.
felt like they wanted to give up, because they realized that they at least have a basic understanding there's nothing wrong with them.
Right. So your hard work really paid off. You're helping so many mothers out there now. Nobody has to feel alone in this anymore, like you did. That's absolutely wonderful. And you've been published in journals, and I know you also have a book, right, about the subject. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, Diane and I did do the first case study some years ago, and there have been other authors who have gotten published case studies since then. So we do have an expanding uh, area of other professionals studying it. But I do have a self-published book at this point
Hmm.
that I published a couple years ago just through Amazon self-publishing. I wanted at least to get something very basic out there that collectively held all the information that I had been gathering over the past decade of working with now thousands of mothers with DMER, that could explain the trends and the commonalities and our very basic knowledge, information about how support people and caregivers and partners can be helpful, and to answer kind of the most frequently asked questions that I'm emailed on a regular basis by mothers who are trying to understand their experience.
Right, wonderful. So that's very helpful for mothers out there to have that resource available. So let's talk a little bit about your presentation here that you will be having shortly, and it's titled Beyond the Letdown, Dysphoric Milk Ejection Reflex and the Breastfeeding Mother. So what will you be presenting? Give us a little bit more without giving too much away, but tell us a little bit about what we can look forward to.
Sure. Well, my original presentation with Gold is my normal introduction to dysphoric milk ejection reflex that's called Before the Letdown, which holds a lot of the beginning information for people who have never heard of it before. But now, a decade into being able to make the information more readily available, there are people who do have all of that basic understanding, but want to know what else have we learned? What have we learned since? What else is there to look at? What are some of the more nitty gritty outside, influences or factors or consequences? What's going out there in the periphery of dysphoric milk ejection reflex? So this presentation gives us some of that, which is why I call it Beyond the Letdown, and starts looking into and reporting on some of the other case studies that have done that goes into how the mother's relationship with herself is affected by DMER, or her relationship with the baby, her personal views on motherhood, and her views on breastfeeding in the face of dysphoric milk ejection reflex. So some of that kind of information.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this presentation. I can't wait to listen to it here. And Alia, thank you so much for sitting down here with me, talking about your work, your journey, and all the wonderful work you're doing in the community and helping all these mothers out there. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And to our listeners now, the presentation Beyond the Letdown, Dysphoric Milk Ejection Reflex, and the Breastfeeding Mother is part of our lecture pack. The lecture pack is titled Complex Medical Issues in the Lactating Parent, and it will be available here at Gold at March 30th. So please visit our website. You can find out more on goldlactation.com and also goldlearning.com. Thank you everyone for listening and participating here with us today. Bye-bye for now.